What you're about to witness will shock you to your core. A defenseless 8-year-old boy, starving and begging for scraps, becomes the target of a vicious drunk's cruelty in the dusty streets of Dust Bowl Creek. But when the most feared man in 3 counties, Wyatt Ironhand McCready, steps out of the shadows, what happens next will leave you speechless. You'll see a grown man's world crumble with a single punch. You'll witness a corrupt judge try to steal a child from the only safety he's ever known, and you'll watch as bullets fly in a final showdown that determines whether evil wins or if justice has the faster draw. This is the story of how one moment of standing up for what's right sparked a war that would change 3 lives forever. And by the end, you'll understand why some men earn their reputation, and why crossing Wyatt McCready was the last mistake anyone ever made. It all started on a cold October morning when little Billy Hawthorne approached the wrong man outside the Broken Wheel Saloon. The boy's stomach gnawed at him like a wild animal. 3 days without a proper meal, sleeping in whatever shelter he could find, wearing clothes that barely qualified as rags. Billy Hawthorne was 8 years old and already knew hunger better than most grown men knew comfort. He stood outside Porter's trading post, watching through the window as Jeb Porter arranged fresh loaves of bread on the counter. The smell drifted through the cracks in the wood, making Billy's mouth water and his knees weak. He'd tried begging from Porter before, but the man had chased him off with a broom, calling him street vermin and threatening to set the dogs on him. Billy's bare feet were wrapped in torn cloth, his face streaked with dirt, and his ribs showed through the holes in his shirt. But desperation makes boys brave, and Billy was desperate. As the morning crowd gathered outside the Broken Wheel Saloon, Billy spotted his chance. A group of ranch hands stood laughing and drinking, their pockets heavy with pay from the cattle drive that had rolled into town the night before. These men had money. These men had eaten breakfast. Billy approached the closest one, a stocky man with whiskey on his breath and cruelty in his eyes. Crazy Jack Murdoch was known throughout Dust Bowl Creek as a man who'd rather start a fight than finish an honest day's work. "Please, mister," Billy whispered, tugging gently on Jack's coat. "Could you spare a penny for bread? I ain't eaten in—" Jack spun around, his bloodshot eyes narrowing as they fixed on the small boy. The other men stopped talking, sensing entertainment. "Well, well, well," Jack slurred, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Look what we got here, boys, a little beggar rat, come to interrupt our morning drinks." Billy stepped back, but Jack grabbed his thin wrist. "You think you can just walk up to working men and ask for handouts, boy? You think we owe you something?" No, sir," Billy stammered. I'm hungry and—" Jack's laughter cut him off, harsh and ugly. "Hungry, hungry." He turned to his friends, still gripping Billy's arm. "Boys, this little rat says he's hungry. Ain't that just heartbreaking?" The other men chuckled nervously. Some looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. Jack yanked Billy closer, his whiskey breath hot against the boy's face. "You want to know what I think about little beggars like you? I think you're nothing but parasites. Useless mouth breathers who'd rather whine than work." He shoved Billy backward, sending the boy stumbling into the dirt. "You want bread? Crawl for it like the dog you are. Get down on your belly and bark. Maybe then I'll toss you a crumb." Billy's cheeks burned with shame, but hunger was stronger than pride. He started to lower himself toward the ground, and Jack's laughter grew louder. "That's right. Show these good people what you really are." That's when the shadow fell across them. The laughter died instantly. The other men took unconscious steps backward. Even the horses seemed to sense something had changed, shifting nervously at their hitching posts. Wyatt McCready stood 6'4" in his boots, with shoulders broad enough to block out the morning sun. His face was weathered leather, marked by a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a memento from his gunfighting days. But it was his eyes that made grown men sweat, gray as storm clouds and twice as dangerous. Crazy Jack Murdoch was known for his loose tongue and quick fists, but even he knew the stories. They said Wyatt McCready had killed 12 men in fair fights and buried twice that many who'd crossed him unfairly. They said he could draw faster than a rattlesnake's strike and shoot straighter than God's own judgment. They said a lot of things about Iron Hand McCready, and every single one of them was true. Jack's grip on his whiskey bottle tightened, but his voice cracked when he spoke. "McCready, didn't see you there." Wyatt said nothing. He simply stepped forward, slow and deliberate, his spurs chinking against the wooden boardwalk. His hand rested casually near his Colt, though he made no move to draw. The silence stretched like a held breath, broken only by the distant sound of a church bell tolling the hour. Then Wyatt spoke, his voice quiet as a grave and twice as final. "Pick up the boy." Jack Murdoch's face went white as sun-bleached bone. The whiskey bottle trembled in his grip, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool October air. Around them, the other ranch hands melted away like shadows at dawn, suddenly finding urgent business elsewhere. "I said," Wyatt repeated, his voice carrying the weight of winter thunder, "pick up the boy." Jack's eyes darted left and right, looking for support that had already vanished. His mouth opened and closed like a landed fish before he finally found his voice. "Now see here, McCready, this ain't your concern. Just some street rat causing trouble." The words died in his throat as Wyatt took another step forward. Just one step, but it might as well have been a death sentence. Jack had seen what happened to men who tested Iron Hand McCready's patience. Most of them were planted in the cemetery on Boot Hill. With shaking hands, Jack bent down and awkwardly hauled Billy to his feet, brushing dirt from the boy's torn shirt with movements that were anything but gentle. "There, happy now?" Wyatt's gray eyes never left Jack's face. "Apologize." "What? You heard me." Jack's pride warred with his survival instinct. Pride lost. "Sorry, kid," he mumbled, not meeting Billy's eyes. "Now get out of my sight," Wyatt said. "And Jack? If I catch you within 50 feet of this boy again, they'll need to identify you by your boots." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled toward his horse, mounted with unsteady hands, and rode out of town like the devil himself was chasing him, which, Billy thought, might not be far from the truth. When the dust settled, Wyatt knelt down to Billy's level. Up close, the boy could see that beneath the fearsome reputation was something else entirely. Kindness that had been weathered by years of hard living, but never broken. "You hurt, son?" Billy shook his head, though his wrist ached where Jack had grabbed him. "No, sir. Thank you for helping me." Wyatt studied him with those storm-gray eyes, taking in the hollow cheeks, the too-thin frame, the way Billy's clothes hung like scarecrow rags. "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning. Found some scraps behind the hotel." Something flickered across Wyatt's face. Pain, maybe, or memory. "What's your name?" "Billy Hawthorne, sir." "Where's your folks, Billy?" The boy's shoulders sagged. "Ma died of the fever last spring. Pa went looking for work in California. Said he'd send for me, but—" Billy's voice trailed off. They both knew men who went looking for gold rarely sent for anything except more whiskey. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, staring at something only he could see. Finally, he stood and placed a gentle hand on Billy's shoulder. "Come on, let's get some food in you." They walked to Porter's trading post, where Jeb Porter nearly dropped his broom when he saw who was accompanying the street vermin he'd chased away so many times before. "Mr. McCready, what can I do for you today?" "The boy needs bread, and some of that cheese you keep behind the counter. The good stuff." Porter's eyes widened. "Of course, right away." He hurried to gather the items, wrapping them carefully in brown paper. When he named a price, Wyatt dropped twice the amount on the counter without a word. As they walked away, Billy clutching the food like it might disappear, he looked up at his unlikely savior. "Why'd you help me?" Wyatt was quiet for so long that Billy thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough as sandpaper. "Had a boy once, about your age. Name was Daniel." They stopped outside Doc Holbrook's office. Through the window, Billy could see the doctor stitching up a cowboy's arm. "What happened to him?" Billy asked softly. "Sickness took him, and his ma." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "3 winters back. Sometimes when I look at you, I see him. See what he might have become if he'd had the chance." Billy didn't know what to say to that kind of pain, so he just stood there, holding his bread and trying not to cry. Doc Holbrook emerged from his office, wiping his hands on a clean towel. He was a small, neat man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Wyatt, don't often see you in town unless someone's bleeding." "Boy needs looking at," Wyatt said simply. "Been living rough." Doc Holbrook knelt down, his examination gentle but thorough. "Undernourished, obviously. Some bruising on the wrist, recent. Feet are cut up pretty bad." He looked up at Wyatt. "Nothing that good food and care won't fix, but he needs both. He'll get them." Something in Wyatt's tone made both the doctor and Billy look at him sharply. The rancher was staring out toward the horizon, toward Rattlesnake Ridge, where his ranch sat like a fortress against the sky. "You got somewhere to stay tonight, Billy?" Wyatt asked. Billy shook his head. "Well," Wyatt said, making a decision that would change all their lives, "you do now." The ride to Rattlesnake Ridge Ranch took the better part of an hour, winding through red rock canyons and scrub brush that stretched toward mountains purple with distance. Billy rode behind Wyatt on his massive black stallion Midnight, clutching the rancher's coat and trying not to look down at the steep drops that flanked the narrow trail. The ranch house sat on a mesa like a stone fortress, built to withstand both Apache raids and Arizona storms. Thick walls, narrow windows, and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Billy could see cattle dotting the valley below like scattered coins. "Welcome to Rattlesnake Ridge," Wyatt said as they dismounted. "Home." The word hit Billy like a physical blow. Home. He'd almost forgotten what that felt like. The front door opened before they reached it, and Billy found himself face to face with a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a storybook. Rose Channing had auburn hair, pinned back sensibly, green eyes that sparkled with intelligence, and flour dusting her apron. She was maybe 30, with the kind of beauty that came from strength rather than softness. "Wyatt McCready," she said, hands on her hips. "Don't you dare track mud across my clean floors." Then her eyes fell on Billy, and her expression softened instantly. "Oh my, who's this little one?" "Billy Hawthorne," Wyatt said. "He'll be staying with us." Rose knelt down to Billy's level, her voice gentle as summer rain. "Hello, Billy, I'm Rose. Are you hungry? Of course you are. Look at you, thin as a rail fence." She stood and swatted Wyatt's arm. "Shame on you, bringing him here without warning me. I would have prepared something special." "He's had bread," Wyatt offered weakly. "Bread?" Rose threw up her hands. "A growing boy needs proper food. Come along, Billy, let's get you fed and cleaned up." The inside of the ranch house was nothing like Billy expected. Instead of the sparse, masculine quarters he'd imagined, the rooms were warm and welcoming. Handmade quilts, books on shelves, wildflowers in mason jars. Rose's touch was everywhere, turning a bachelor's fortress into something that felt like home. She sat Billy at the kitchen table and bustled around, producing a bowl of beef stew that smelled like heaven and a glass of fresh milk that Billy drank so fast he gave himself hiccups. Rose laughed, a sound like silver bells, and rubbed his back until they subsided. "Slow down, sweetheart. There's plenty more where that came from." While Billy ate, Rose peppered him with gentle questions. Where was he from? How old was he? Could he read, write? Billy answered between spoonfuls, amazed at how easy it was to talk to her. She didn't look at him with pity or disgust, just genuine interest and kindness. Wyatt sat quietly in the corner, watching this interaction with something that might have been wonder. Billy caught him staring and realized the big man was seeing something he'd thought lost forever, the sight of a child being cared for in his home. After supper, Rose drew a hot bath and found Billy some of Wyatt's old clothes, rolled up and pinned to fit his small frame. She washed his hair with soap that smelled like lavender and tended to the cuts on his feet with the gentle efficiency of someone who'd done plenty of nursing. "There now," she said, toweling his hair dry. "You look almost human again." That first night, Billy slept in the spare room on clean sheets that smelled like sunshine. Through the open window, he could hear coyotes singing in the distance, and the gentle lowing of cattle. For the first time in months, he felt safe. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that Billy had never experienced, but seemed to have been waiting for his whole life. He woke to the smell of Rose's biscuits and coffee, helped with morning chores, and spent his afternoons learning the ways of ranch life. Wyatt was a patient teacher, showing Billy how to milk cows, mend fences, and handle horses. The boy had natural ability and wasn't afraid of hard work. More importantly, he was eager to please the man who'd saved him. "You're a quick learner," Wyatt told him one afternoon as they repaired a gate. "Got good hands and a steady eye." Billy glowed under the praise like a flower turning toward the sun. Rose took charge of his education, discovering that while Billy could barely read, he had a sharp mind and a hunger for knowledge. They spent evenings by the fire, Rose reading aloud from books while Billy followed along, his finger tracing the words. Word of Billy's presence at the ranch spread quickly through Dust Bowl Creek. Some folks nodded approvingly. Wyatt McCready had always been a decent man beneath his fearsome reputation. Others whispered that it was strange, a gunfighter playing father to a street orphan. But when Sheriff Clay Garrett rode out to check on the situation, he found Billy healthy, happy, and clearly thriving. The boy who'd been begging in the streets was learning to rope cattle and helping Rose in her garden. "Looks like you found yourself a family," the sheriff observed. Billy looked up from the calf he was feeding. "Yes, sir, I reckon I have." Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, perhaps, to last. 3 weeks into what Billy had begun to think of as his new life, trouble arrived in the form of a telegram delivered by a nervous-looking writer who wouldn't meet Wyatt's eyes. Rose was teaching Billy his letters on the front porch when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Wyatt emerged from the barn, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun belt, as he recognized the territorial messenger's uniform. "Telegram for Wyatt McCready," the young man stammered, holding out the yellow paper like it might bite him, "from the territorial courthouse in Phoenix." Wyatt read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. Rose saw the change in his expression and gently moved Billy behind her. "What is it?" she asked. "Says here that Billy's got family back east. An uncle named Ezra Hawthorne from Boston claims he's been searching for the boy since his father died in a mining accident in California." Wyatt's voice was flat, controlled. "Says he's got legal papers and a judge's order for Billy's return." Billy's face went pale. "I don't know any Uncle Ezra. Pa never mentioned family back east." "Maybe your pa didn't want you to know," Rose said gently, but her eyes were worried. "Sometimes families fall out, lose touch." "There's more," Wyatt continued reading. "Says if Billy isn't surrendered voluntarily, territorial authorities will come collect him. Letters signed by Judge Silas Murdoch." The name hit like a thunderclap. Billy recognized it immediately. Murdoch, same as Crazy Jack, who'd humiliated him in town. "That's Jack's brother," Billy whispered. "The drunk from the saloon. His brother's a judge." Wyatt crumpled the telegram in his fist. "Seems so, and seems like our friend Jack's been telling tales about the dangerous gunfighter who's holding a boy against his will." The implications settled over them like storm clouds. This wasn't about Billy's welfare. This was revenge, dressed up in legal papers and family concern. Over the next few days, more pressure mounted. Sheriff Garrett rode out again, this time looking uncomfortable and official. "I don't like this any more than you do, Wyatt," he said, refusing Rose's offer of coffee. "But I got orders from the territorial government. Judge Murdoch sent word that if the boy isn't turned over to his rightful guardian by week's end, they'll send U.S. Marshals." Marshals, Wyatt repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Federal jurisdiction trumps local, Garrett said apologetically. My hands are tied. You know I think you've done right by the boy, but the law's the law. After the sheriff left, Billy found Wyatt standing on the ridge overlooking the valley, staring at the sunset like it might be his last. You're thinking of giving me up, Billy said. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking of keeping you safe. Safe? Billy's voice cracked. You think sending me to some stranger who's working with the man who hurt me is safe? Wyatt turned, and Billy saw something in those storm-gray eyes he'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Boy, I've faced down Apache war parties and outlaw gangs without breaking a sweat. But the law, that's different. I can't shoot a judge or a U.S. Marshal, no matter how corrupt they are. So that's it? You're just giving up? The words stung, and Billy saw Wyatt flinch. I'm trying to think of a way that doesn't end with me dead and you still taken. That night, Rose found Billy packing his few belongings into a flour sack. Where do you think you're going, young man? Away, Billy said, not looking at her. If I run, they can't make Wyatt give me up. Can't send marshals after him for something he didn't do. Rose sat on the edge of the bed. And where exactly would you run to? Back to begging in the streets? Sleeping in alleyways? Better than being sent to people who want to hurt me. Oh, sweetheart. Rose pulled him into her arms, and Billy didn't resist. Running never solved anything. It just makes the problem someone else's to deal with. Then what do we do? Before Rose could answer, they heard horses approaching fast, multiple riders coming hard up the trail. Wyatt's voice carried from outside, sharp with command. Rose, get Billy away from the windows. Through the curtains they could see torches bobbing in the darkness. At least 6 riders, maybe more. As they drew closer, a familiar voice rang out, slurred with drink, but unmistakably threatening. McCready, we know you got the boy in there. Judge says you're harboring him illegal-like. Crazy Jack Murdoch had returned, and this time he'd brought friends, men with guns and badges and the kind of confidence that came from having the law on their side, corrupt or not. You got until sunrise to hand him over peaceful-like, Jack shouted. Otherwise we come in and take him. Billy pressed against Rose, feeling her trembling despite her brave face. Outside they could hear Wyatt's boots on the porch boards, the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. Wyatt McCready don't surrender to nobody, came the reply, calm as death itself. You want the boy? You'll have to go through me. The siege of Rattlesnake Ridge had begun. The standoff stretched through the night like a held breath. Jack Murdoch and his men made camp at the base of the mesa, their fires flickering like angry eyes in the darkness. They had the advantage of numbers, 8 men with rifles and the backing of territorial law. But they also had to come up a narrow trail with no cover, and everyone in 3 counties knew that Wyatt McCready could pick off a man at 200 yards. Inside the ranch house, preparations were methodical and grim. Wyatt moved through the rooms like a general preparing for siege, checking ammunition, positioning water barrels, and reinforcing windows with furniture. How many bullets you got? Billy asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Enough, Wyatt replied, but Billy caught the quick calculation in his eyes. Not enough for 8 men, not if this dragged on. Rose had transformed the kitchen into a makeshift fortress, barricading the back door and filling every pot and basin with water. Her hands were steady, but Billy noticed she kept touching the small silver cross at her throat. You're scared, he said. Terrified, she admitted. But that doesn't mean we give up. As dawn approached, Jack's voice carried up from below. Last chance, McCready. Send down the boy or we're coming up. Wyatt appeared on the porch, rifle in hand. In the growing light, Billy could see the men below clearly. Rough types. The kind who hired their guns to whoever paid best. Not lawmen, despite the badges some wore. Mercenaries. The boy stays with me, Wyatt called back. Any man who tries to take him dies. Jack laughed, the sound harsh in the morning air. You're 1 against 8, McCready. Even Iron Hand can't beat those odds. Want to test that theory? For a moment, silence. Then Jack made his mistake. Maybe it was the drink, maybe it was anger, but he stepped into the open, raising his rifle toward the house. Wyatt's shot rang out like thunder. Jack spun and fell, clutching his shoulder, his rifle spinning away into the rocks. The other men scrambled for cover, but the message was clear. The most feared man in 3 counties still had his touch. Next one won't be a warning, Wyatt shouted. But Jack's fall seemed to enrage rather than discourage his men. Bullets began peppering the house, splintering wood and shattering glass. Billy and Rose huddled in the kitchen, while Wyatt moved from window to window, returning fire with deadly precision. One of the attackers tried to circle around to the barn. Wyatt's bullet found him before he made it halfway. Another attempted to climb the rocks on the eastern face of the mesa. He made it 30 feet before joining his companion in the dirt. By midday, 3 of Jack's men were down, but ammunition was running low. Worse, Wyatt had taken a bullet in his left arm, the blood seeping through his shirt despite Rose's hurried bandaging. "This can't go on," Rose whispered as she reloaded rifles. "They'll wear us down eventually." Billy had been quiet for hours, thinking. Now he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I'm going out there." "Like hell you are," Wyatt growled, wincing as he shifted position. "Listen to me," Billy said, his young voice carrying an authority that surprised them all. "They want me, right? So I give myself up, but on my terms. Meet them halfway down the trail, in the open where everyone can see." "Billy, no," Rose started. "It's the only way to end this without getting you both killed," Billy continued. "I walk down there, and when they try to take me, when they show their true colors in front of witnesses," he looked at Wyatt meaningfully, "that's when you do what you do best." Wyatt stared at the boy for a long moment. "You're asking me to use you as bait. I'm asking you to trust me, and I'm asking you to be ready." Through the broken window, they could see more riders approaching from town. Sheriff Garrett and several deputies, drawn by the gunfire. But whose side would they take when federal law conflicted with local justice? "Time's running out," Billy said. "They're going to rush the house soon, and somebody's going to die. Maybe all of us. This way, we control how it happens." Wyatt closed his eyes, and Billy saw the war raging behind them. Every instinct screamed against putting the boy in danger, but the boy was right. They were outgunned and surrounded, and conventional tactics would only end one way. "All right," Wyatt said finally, "but you do exactly what I say when I say it, and if anything goes wrong—" "It won't," Billy said with more confidence than he felt. "You taught me to be brave, now let me prove I learned." As Billy walked toward the front door, Rose caught his arm. "You come back to us," she whispered fiercely. "You hear me? You come back." Billy nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. Outside, the sun was reaching its zenith, and shadows were growing short. It was time for the showdown that would determine all their fates. Billy stepped onto the porch with his hands raised, the morning sun casting his small shadow across the weathered boards. Below, Jack Murdoch struggled to his feet, his wounded shoulder making him list to one side like a damaged ship. The remaining 5 mercenaries had their rifles trained on the house, but their attention shifted to the boy walking slowly down the trail. "That's far enough, kid," Jack called out, his voice strained with pain and whiskey. "Just keep walking down here, nice and easy." Sheriff Garrett and his deputies had taken position behind the rocks 50 yards to the east, close enough to witness, but far enough to avoid crossfire. Billy could see the conflict in the sheriff's face, torn between territorial orders and local justice. "I want to talk first," Billy shouted, stopping halfway down the trail where everyone could see him clearly. "Before I go anywhere, I want to know about this uncle of mine." Jack laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the canyon walls. "Smart little rat, ain't you? Fine. Your precious Uncle Ezra sent word through proper channels. Says he's been looking for you since your daddy died in that mine collapse." "What mine?" Billy asked loudly, making sure the sheriff could hear every word. "What was my daddy's name?" Jack's confident grin faltered slightly. "What's it matter? Point is, you got family wanting you back. If you really got papers from my uncle, you'd know my daddy's name. You'd know which mine he worked." Billy's voice carried clearly in the thin mountain air. "But you don't, do you? Because there ain't no Uncle Ezra." Sheriff Garrett straightened, his hand moving to his gun. The pieces were falling into place, and he didn't like the picture they made. "Shut your mouth and get down here," Jack snarled, raising his rifle with his good arm. That's when Wyatt's voice rang out like the voice of judgment itself. "I wouldn't, Jack." Every eye turned to the ridge above the house, where Wyatt McCready stood silhouetted against the sky. He held his rifle steady despite his wounded arm, and even at this distance, his reputation made every man below nervous. "This is between me and the boy," Jack shouted. "No," Wyatt replied, his voice carrying like thunder. "This is between me and men who'd hurt a child for money. Sheriff Garrett." The lawman looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "You hearing this? Boys asking legitimate questions about this supposed family. Questions any real uncle could answer. But Jack here can't answer them, can he?" Sheriff Garrett's voice cracked slightly as he called back. "What are you saying, McCready?" "I'm saying there ain't no Uncle Ezra. I'm saying Judge Murdoch cooked up fake papers to steal a boy for his brother's revenge. And I'm saying every man down there who's taking money to kidnap a child is about to face the consequences." Jack's face twisted with rage. "Enough! Take him." Two of the mercenaries started up the trail toward Billy. The boy stood his ground, heart hammering but remembering Wyatt's lessons about courage under fire. "Stop right there." Sheriff Garrett's voice cracked like a whip. His gun was drawn now, pointed at Jack. "If what McCready says is true, this whole thing's illegal. I won't be party to kidnapping." "The judge gave you orders," Jack screamed. "A corrupt judge giving illegal orders," Garrett shot back. "Those papers better be real, Murdoch, or you're looking at federal charges." That's when Jack made his final, fatal mistake. Desperate and cornered, he swung his rifle toward Billy. "I'll kill the brat before I let McCready win." Wyatt's shot rang out before Jack could pull the trigger. The bullet took Jack square in the chest, spinning him around and dropping him into the dust. He tried to rise once, blood frothing at his lips, then fell still. The silence that followed was broken by the distinctive sound of hammers being cocked. The remaining mercenaries found themselves facing not just Wyatt's rifle, but Sheriff Garrett and his deputies as well. "Drop your weapons," Garrett commanded. "All of you, this operation's done." One by one, the rifles hit the ground. The fight had gone out of them the moment their leader fell, and the law turned against them. Billy ran back up the trail, straight into Rose's arms as she burst from the house. Wyatt climbed down from his perch, moving slowly but steadily, his gray eyes never leaving the surrendering men. Sheriff Garrett holstered his weapon and walked over to Jack's body, nudging it with his boot. "Well, McCready, looks like you were right. No Uncle Ezra, just a drunk's revenge dressed up in legal papers." "What happens now?" Billy asked, still clinging to Rose. Garrett looked at the boy, then at Wyatt and Rose, standing together like a real family. Now I ride to Phoenix and have a long talk with Judge Murdoch about falsifying territorial documents, and you three go back to living your lives." As the dust settled and the last of the mercenaries were led away in chains, Billy looked up at the man who'd saved him twice now. "Is it over?" Wyatt's scarred hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder. "It's over, son. You're home." 6 months later, the territory had changed as much as the lives of those who lived on Rattlesnake Ridge. Judge Silas Murdoch sat in a federal prison. His corrupt empire crumbled after Sheriff Garrett's investigation uncovered years of falsified documents and illegal rulings. The territorial government had sent a new judge to Dust Bowl Creek, a stern but honest man who believed in justice over politics. The scandal had rippled through the territory like wildfire. Newspapers as far as Denver ran stories about the iron hand justice delivered by Wyatt McCready, and how a small boy's courage had exposed corruption at the highest levels. But for the residents of Rattlesnake Ridge Ranch, the real changes were quieter and more profound. Billy stood taller now, his shoulders broader from months of ranch work and regular meals. The hollow-cheeked waif who'd begged for bread was gone, replaced by a confident boy who could rope a calf, read from the Bible, and help Rose with her increasingly complex bookkeeping. The nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams of the future. "Wyatt," Rose called from the kitchen window, "breakfast is ready, and Billy, don't you dare track mud across my clean floors." Billy grinned and carefully wiped his boots before entering. Some things never changed, Rose's fierce protection of her spotless kitchen being one of them. But other things had changed in ways that surprised them all. The three of them had become something neither Wyatt nor Rose had dared hope for after their losses. A real family, not bound by blood, but by choice and love, and the shared experience of standing together when the world tried to tear them apart. At breakfast, Wyatt announced his decision. "Been thinking about expanding the ranch, maybe hiring some hands, building up the herd." "That's wonderful," Rose said, refilling his coffee. "The land can certainly support more cattle." "Also been thinking about making some other changes," Wyatt continued, his weathered face showing the faintest hint of color. "Rose, you've been here 8 months now, turning this old bachelor's house into a home. Billy's got a family he can count on. Seems to me it's time to make things official." Rose's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Billy looked up from his eggs, suddenly very interested in the conversation. "Official how?" Rose asked carefully. Wyatt reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but clearly chosen with care. "Official like this. Rose Channing, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? And Billy, would you do me the honor of becoming my son? Legal-like, with papers and everything?" Rose's eyes filled with tears, but her smile could have lit up the whole territory. "Wyatt McCready, are you proposing to me at the breakfast table? Seemed as good a place as any. We've shared enough meals here to know we fit together." Billy jumped up from his chair, nearly knocking it over. "You mean it? I'd be your real son, with a real name and everything?" "Billy McCready," Wyatt said, trying the name out. "Has a nice ring to it." "Billy McCready," the boy repeated, wonder in his voice. "I like it. I like it a lot." Rose wiped her eyes with her apron and held out her hand for the ring. "Yes, you stubborn, wonderful man. Yes to all of it." The wedding took place a month later in the little church in Dust Bowl Creek. Sheriff Garrett stood as Wyatt's best man, and half the territory showed up to witness the ceremony. Billy wore his first real suit, standing proud as Wyatt's adopted son and Rose's new boy. During the reception, Doc Holbrook pulled Wyatt aside. "You know, I've been thinking about that day you brought Billy to me. Broken down, half-starved, scared of his own shadow. Look at him now." They both watched as Billy danced with Rose, laughing as she taught him the steps to a waltz. "Boy saved us as much as we saved him," Wyatt said quietly. "Gave us a reason to be a family again. And the territory's a better place for it. Word is, applications for adoption have tripled since your story got out. Seems like folks are remembering that family's about more than just blood." As the sun set over the celebration, Wyatt found himself on the church steps with his new family. Rose leaned against his shoulder, her wedding dress glowing in the golden light. Billy sat on the step below them, still wearing his suit jacket despite the heat. "What now?" Billy asked, echoing the question he'd posed months ago when their journey began. "Now we go home," Rose said simply. "We raise cattle and children and grow old together." "All of us?" Billy asked. "All of us," Wyatt confirmed, his arm tightening around his wife and his free hand resting on his son's shoulder. In the distance, Rattlesnake Ridge stood silhouetted against the evening sky, no longer a fortress of solitude, but a beacon of hope. Home to the McCready family, where love had conquered law, courage had defeated corruption, and 3 broken souls had found wholeness in each other. The frontier was still wild, still dangerous, still full of men like Jack Murdoch who preyed on the innocent. but it was also full of people like Wyatt, Rose, and Billy, people who understood that the strongest law wasn't written in books or enforced by badges. It was written in the heart, and enforced by those brave enough to stand up and say, "Not on my watch." And in the growing darkness of the Arizona Territory, that was law enough.